Employment Nondiscrimination Act. This will be the next thing coming down the pipe. This would force nationwide, basically homosexual, bisexual, lesbian, and transgender acceptance in every workplace across the country. You would have to train, you'd have to teach, and what do you mean by transgender? Well, and you're going to think I'm making this stuff up, but I'm not. Transgender, which has been passed in other states, means that if a male comes to the office one day and he feels like a female, and you tell him he can't go into the girls' bathroom, like a teacher at your school, then you are now in violation of federal law for engaging in transgender discrimination. Okay? You cannot stop the male who now feels like a female from going into the girls' bathroom at your school, at your work, or wherever else. And again, absent some dramatic change, I mean, if they've got the numbers for hate crimes, they'll probably have the numbers for this. There is no exception for religion, for religious conscience. And so it's going to be forced on, if you're a Christian bookstore, sorry. If you're a Christian broadcaster, sorry. You now have to hire, all kinds of people that are immoral based upon your beliefs, because the government is now deciding what's moral and immoral, and they're going to force everybody in the country to accept it. Conscience regulations. Right at the end of the Bush administration, a number of bills were passed to kind of package something that had been unsaid policy in this country for years, which is we don't have the government force doctors or hospitals to violate their faith. So, for instance, a Catholic hospital or doctor that was pro-life should never be forced to engage in some sort of abortion. Most people thought that was kind of non-controversial. Most people would agree on that. Well, under the new administration, that is now in the process of being repealed, where there will be no more conscience protections in hospitals and with physicians around the country. And there's been lawsuits on this as well, and they've gone the wrong way. A lot of you have heard about the Fairness Doctrine. What they're doing, what they're in the process of trying to do now with the Fairness Doctrine is not the Fairness Doctrine, but new regulations are in the plans that will begin to control what happens on the radio stations. And they don't do it by saying we're going to get rid of conservative radio or conservative talk radio or people like Rush Limbaugh or whatever. But what they say is we're going to go to and there's a number of different approaches, but one of them is we're going to go to localism. What that means is that we're only going to carry shows that originate in your community. That would mean something that's really popular nationwide, like Limbaugh or Hannity or you name it. Well, they can only go in the area where they are. And so what they're trying to do, obviously, is destroy popularity of conservative talk radio, and that they're talking about coming up with community advisory councils on each station to see what they're playing, which will then start pressuring them to do things more in the interest of the community than they're currently doing. So anyway, just get ready, because it's coming. The numbers on the FCC are now in favor of people who do want to begin to scale back free speech on the radio, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of which vehicles or which weapons they try to use. Just a recent one, already one that, again, candidate Obama promised, and now we're seeing the fruition of, is Obama promised the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act, which the Defense of Marriage Act is a federal law that was signed by Bill Clinton. Okay, it's not exactly an extreme law. It was almost unanimously supported. But now it's a horrible thing, and President Obama has said he wants to repeal it. Why? Because it defines marriage in the United States as a man and a woman for purposes of federal law. And it also says that if you go to some state like Massachusetts and they want to redefine marriage in some way, like two men or two women, and then those people try to come to Texas and tell us that we have to recognize their so-called marriage, the Defense of Marriage Act says no. The state has a right to not accept other definitions from other states. Well, that's what they want to destroy. And so, again, the president has promised, you can go to whitehouse.gov and you can read it, how one of his purposes is to get rid of the Defense of Marriage Act. Well, just 2 weeks ago, the Attorney General in Massachusetts filed a lawsuit to overturn the Defense of Marriage Act, and the response of the Department of Justice official, now this is the attorney that's responsible for defending the federal law, their comment was that they thought the Defense of Marriage Act was, quote, disgusting and discriminated against gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals. So that might be a little bit of a hint of how energetic they are going to be to defend the law, which is not very much. So it's going to depend upon groups like us to jump in and defend the law against really what, their own efforts of what they're trying to do. So there's, I could keep going down a long list, but that's depressing enough. But I want to give you a little feel about, if you care about religious freedom, if you care about God's definition of marriage, if you care about any of these things, they're all going to be coming under assault. Some of them you're already seeing. The other is in the pipeline. Homosexuals in the military, that's on the list too. There's already been legislation filed. That's on the list, on the list of the White House. So all these things are going to be battles in the upcoming months, in the upcoming years. In Texas, we just finished a session, and we thought it was going to be a pretty good session, and then some weird stuff happened in the House, which made it a very difficult session. We had a conservative governor, a conservative Senate, and a conservative House, and then we had somewhat of a coup in the House, and we didn't really have a conservative House anymore. And the result of that was it was hard to get any really good legislation through the House, even stuff that was wildly popular. So the ultrasound bill, which would have required every abortion clinic in Texas to give the right to the girl or the woman to see the sonogram of their baby before an abortion could be given. Sounds reasonable. I thought they were for choice, right? So why wouldn't you want to show the girl the sonogram of her baby and let her make the decision? Well, they didn't want that at all. Now, we had a number of co-sponsors where we could have passed this easily. But again, the House wouldn't let it through, and so it got killed. And a lot of bad stuff was coming out of the House. A hate crimes bill for children in Texas came out of the House. The first version of it said that if the beliefs of the child were out of line with what the government thought they should be, that they could not only force the beliefs on the child, but they could force counseling on the child. I mean, it sounds like you're in some different country. That came out of the House. Fortunately, we were able to kill that and a bunch of other bad bills, but it was a pretty rough session for Texas standards. The State Board of Education Chairman, John McElroy, was basically not put back in his place. I mean, you have to get a vote of 2/3 in the state Senate in order to have the governor's pick for the chairman. You got to have 2/3 vote to put them back in. Well, he was not confirmed to his seat and basically taken out as chairman because he was a Christian. If you looked at what they said, they criticized him because of his religious beliefs. That things like that he didn't believe in evolution. And these are the things they belittled and attacked him with. So, you'd think you're in a different country. Certainly you weren't in Texas during the session. It's a pretty rough session. The good news is the people had the final word on a lot of these things. And for instance, the battle that was going on at the State Board of Education, we had a policy in Texas. We've had it for 20 years. We say, look, when you teach science, I don't care what science it is, we teach the strengths and weaknesses of all theories, of all scientific theories. That's just basic education. Well, there was a pretty severe liberal attack that came in, and they said, we don't want you to teach the weaknesses of evolution. And I'll be darned if they didn't have a majority vote by 1 vote in the State Board of Education to rip out this policy we've had for 20 years. And they were going to say, we're not going to teach strengths and weaknesses anymore, because if we did that, we'd have to teach the strengths and weaknesses of evolution. But what happened is so many calls came in from people who were very upset about this, from churches and from communities all over the state, that one of the board members who actually voted to change the standards said to our legislative director, you don't understand the number of calls I've got. Something has to be done. So they went back into a special session, came up with new language, and totally reversed themselves at the last second, solely because of calls from people across Texas, where now Texas standards say specifically that you have to teach all sides of any theory, you have to allow critical thinking and questions, etc. That was all placed back in because the people had the final say in the state of Texas. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the legislature, a lot of stuff that's difficult on the national level because elections have results, and some folks with some very different values than your typical person that goes to church are in control of things now. But there's still a lot of opportunities, and it's a great time to be faithful because you'll certainly stand out for doing the right thing.